Hi Booktube, and welcome to a new video. This is take up a challenge from Roz over at Scully Dandling About the Books, where she introduced an occasional video which she's calling Booktube Made Me Do It. And part of what lies behind that, obviously, is how Booktube, or having a channel, has changed to some extent, or certain aspects of the way that she reads, and that's the challenge I'd like to take up today. As I say, Roz will be doing a series of these. I'm going to pile all of mine into this video alone. And the first thing to say about how it's sort of changed how I read is it's definitely expanded the ambit of books that I read, and I'll go into that in the heart of this video. But just sort of even thinking about some of the read-alongs or the themed reading months. So for the last 2 years I've done non-fiction November. I don't normally read a huge amount of non-fiction, even though I'm an author. I don't research much. I like to rely on my own sort of powers of imagination, and usually Wikipedia suffices for my research, because I'm not after facts, I'm after metaphors and images that I can make from bits of information. But because Non-Fiction November asks you to read 4 works of up to 4 works of non-fiction, and uses one-word prompts, which I think is ingenious because it leaves it very wide open. For the last 2 years, I've participated in Non-Fiction November. The first year I did it, I actually ended up reading 6 non-fiction books in November. So I don't know what my previous percentage was of non-fiction compared to fiction, but since doing non-fiction November, I've been around 18% of all my annual books read have been non-fiction, which I suspect is higher than it was previously. So another sort of reading challenge I did last year was read more German lit, and I ended up reading 15, or was it 20? No, I think it was 15 books that originally appeared in German. Now, I have read books in German before. The previous year, before this challenge, I read 3 Stefan Zweig books. I'm a huge Kafka fan. Stana Stanisic, who's Serbian by birth but fled the civil war in Yugoslavia to Germany and wrote his debut novel in German. So it wasn't a new concept for me, but it enabled me to read some books that I really should have got around to reading a lot sooner. And I also discovered some authors. I discovered Una Kazern. I read 2 of her books. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a huge literary output because she was mainly a painter. And then I discovered some German classics like The Seventh Cross by Anna Sagers. The Train Arrived on Time. I think that was Heinrich Boll. Melina. So, you know, that still expanded my horizons, even though I had read German lit. And also for the past 2 years, I've done the Read More Women Challenge. And let's put it this way, last year I did not award a Read of the Year, but the 2 previous years were both won by women writers, which was the Lost Children Archive and Milkman. So in those general ways, by participating, by joining in, I think I've widened the normal scope of book that I might pick up, particularly in non-fiction. Also in read-alongs, or buddy reads I should say, that has helped support me when I felt daunted by certain books, or just made it more fun and made me more liable to pick up the book sooner. So for example, the Ulysses buddy read, which unfortunately was truncated by the pandemic breaking out, but I put off reading Ulysses for 20-30 years. I'd owned a copy, and it was that buddy read that has got me, I think, about a third of the way through. And even though the buddy read, because we've all now got our separate ways on the book, so the buddy read won't still be there, but I feel confident enough, having read the first third, that I can finish it this year on my own. So buddy reads have also helped me pick up books that I might not have picked up before, even though I own them. So those sort of general ways in which Booktube has expanded my ambit, but I wanted to sort of be more specific. So as of today, which I think is the 23rd of April, So we're almost a third of the way through the year. And I've completed 30 books, and I'm throwing another 5 that will probably be amongst my next reads. So 35 books in all. And I just wanted to throw some stats at you, and then I'm going to drill down into them. So of those 35 books, 21 have directly come via Booktube, and I'll break down how they've come via Booktube. 2 I found on Twitter. 1 I found in someone had tweeted. Had they tweeted? No, someone via Booktube, a viewer, not a booktuber, had pointed me to a list of 50 bests or 100 best novels. I can't remember what the time period was. And I found one on that list that I'd never heard of and picked up and read. I mean, it was terrible as it goes, but that's not the point. 1 from Goodreads, which I'll expand on. There's one, I'm not exactly sure how I came by it. So Laurent Binet is one of my favourite authors. I've read his 2 previous novels. Somehow I found out that his new novel was due this year. Now I can't remember whether that was Twitter, Goodreads or Booktube. So I don't actually know where that one came from. I would have found it eventually because he's such a hot author for me. But the problem that Booktube addresses is I'm not plugged into any sources of information about upcoming new release books, new publications. You know, I'm not on any lists of publishers. I don't take a daily paper, so I never know when the online sort of broadsheets are going to talk about upcoming books in the year and things like that. So I have no external sources of information outside of things like Booktube and Goodreads. 1 book I was directly sent by the author. 6 I had on my shelf, so they're already there when I picked them up this year. And 2 are non-fiction, which I'm not really. There's nothing to say about them really. They weren't via Goodreads. They weren't via Booktube. I have to say that. In fact, I think I just did an Amazon search on the keyword dub. But anyway, they don't really factor into what we're talking about. So I'm just going to drill down a bit more into that. So as I say, 21 books directly came via Booktube, but they came in 4 different ways. 10 were from people's reviews, 4 were from people's hauls, 1 was mentioned in passing, and I'll explain what I mean by that. 3 were mentioned by commenters, so people who don't have Booktube channels, and 3 were gifts sent to me by other Booktubers, all of them unsolicited, I have to say, very kindly. So, as I say, 21 out of 35 books this year have gone via Booktube, and if you throw in Twitter, that's 23. Yeah, so 23 of 35 books have basically been put under my nose for me to pick up. So the Vivek Shreya, the subtweet, was reviewed by Matthew Sharappa, and I picked that up. Ryan Hughes, which is a 5-star read for me. It's a sort of graphic novel called XX, but it's more than a graphic novel. In fact, it's not a graphic novel. It's a text novel with lots of graphics and sort of calligraphy in it. That I saw reviewed by Eric Carl Anderson. Now, Robert Perisic, No Signal Area, was a book that I had on my shelf. Now, it's his second book, and his first one, which was called Our Man in Iraq, I saw either hauled or reviewed last year, picked it up last year, read it, loved it. So I was on the lookout for when his new book would be released. And I can't remember where I saw the fact that it was released. I do remember watching Camille Reed's review of it, but I'd heard of it before then. So I'm not actually quite sure how that got to be on my shelf. But it's entirely logical why, because I liked his first book. A book of poetry, and yes, I ought to say that before Booktube I wasn't reading poetry at all, and I don't read a huge amount, but what I do all comes from Booktube because I'm definitely not plugged into the world of contemporary poets. So this is Justin Philip Reed, The Malevolent Volume. Again, Matthew Sharappa reviewed that. Shola von Reiholt's novel Lot, Matthew Sharappa reviewed that. David Mazzucchelli, and this is a graphic novel, this is called Asterios Polyp, was I think either reviewed or mentioned in passing by Daniel at Guilty Feet. And very good it was too, 5 stars for me. Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, I had heard of, but it was a buddy read, and that got me over the line because I struggled with it a bit, to be honest. Roya Marsh's poetry collection Daylight, yes, Matthew Sharappa. Rebecca Watson's book Little Scratch, I can't remember if that was hauled or reviewed by Eric Carl Anderson. I suspect it was hauled. That's where I came across it, and I'm very pleased it was too, because it's definitely in, even though I reject the label, the experimental wing of literature. Larry Kramer's The American People, Volume 2. Now, that was recommended to me by a Booktube viewer of mine called Mitchell Axler. He had just read it and recommended it to me. Now, Jamie Batchen's Siphonophore, he is the author who sent me, and he did ask me first, he's the author who sent me his book, and that was a 5-star read. That was the only non-Booktube 5-star read I've had this year. Harry Matthews' Toulouse, which is the book that came from the list of 50 best novels of post-Second World War, or whatever it was, and I hated it, I'm afraid. Fiona Benson's Bright Travellers, a poetry collection. Now, this was not from Booktube, this is actually from Twitter. I saw someone discussing it there. Now, whether the person discussing it is on Booktube or not, I don't know, I didn't go that far. Jeff Noon's Needle in the Groove was a reread for me, therefore it was on my shelf anyway. Now, I. Mayor McBride's Strange Hotel. I'd read a book of hers and not liked it, called The Lesser Bohemians, and had no real intention of reading her again, but in reading reviews about this book on Goodreads, rather, because I'm not sure anyone's talked about it that I've seen on Booktube. So I think this was a Goodreads one where I read the reviews, and the reviews sort of said, oh, this is sufficiently unlike her other novels that I thought I'm going to read it. Stephen Hall's Maxwell's Demon, that was reviewed by Bob the Bookerer. Nona Fernandez, Space Invaders, was reviewed by Roxy over at A Chaotic Bibliophile. Kevin Davies' book Radio Joan was sent to me by a Goodreads, has become a friend, I suppose, really, called Jonathan Paul. I mean, we have met up in the flesh in London. He'd read and recommended me Kevin Davies' debut novel called Playing Possum, and he just sent this to me, sort of completely unprompted, and very good it was too. It's almost 5 stars, not quite. Then it was Nupaming by Leanne Better-Samoaske Simpson, 5 stars. That was again via Matthew Sharappa. A lot of these ones from Matthew were in his best books of 2020. William Gaddis' The Recognitions was on my shelf, but a buddy read helped me get through it because it's a tough old read. Jesse Greengrass's The High House, I saw either hauled or reviewed by Eric Carl Anderson, I can't remember which, but it was definitely by Eric, and 5 stars for me. Dennis Johnson's Tree of Smoke was on my shelf. Chris Power, A Lonely Man, now that was hauled by Eric, I don't think he's read it yet. Franz Kafka, obviously, The Lost Writings. Obviously, I've heard of Franz Kafka. He's my favourite writer across all books considered, his entire oeuvre. But I was completely unaware that they'd managed to unearth some previously untranslated works of Kafka, and I was alerted to that by Mitchell Axler again, so a Booktube viewer. Now, the only book I'm completely unsure of is, I can't remember if I already said this, is Laurent Binet's new book, Civilizations. I was very aware of Laurent Binet because I loved his first 2 novels. Somehow I saw that he had a new one coming out. I cannot remember where I gleaned that information. Evan Dara's Flea was sent to me by Paper Bird, the booktuber, when I happened to mention on a review of his of another Evan Dara book, that Dara's books are incredibly hard to get hold of in the UK because they're through Dara's own publishing company called Aurora Books, and completely unprompted, Paper Bird sent me both Flea and The Easy Chain, which I haven't read yet. 5 stars. And then Michelle Gallen's Big Girl Small Town was definitely via Booktube. Loads of people were reviewing it and talking about it. Interestingly, a lot of the readers of it had done it as an audiobook. I know Sean the Book Maniac, Zena at Beating Around the Books, Roz at Scully Dandling About the Books were all early adopters of the book. I have to say I didn't like it as much as they did, but that's not the point. And then the upcoming books, as I say, The Easy Chain by Evan Dara was part of the package that Paperbird sent me, so that's another Booktube book. I have a book of Laotian short stories, which Roz from Scully Dandling About the Books sent me. We were talking about Laos because it's a country I'm interested in because it borders on Cambodia, which is a country I'm obsessed with. What interests me about Laos is we don't know much about it. It's sort of shrouded in mystery, even in terms of what its population is and where its borders actually are. So Roz and I were having a chat across Voxer, I think, about it, and she just very kindly sent it to me. I haven't read it yet, but that's another book gifted to me via Booktube. I have just finished Will Eaves's book called The Absent Therapist, which was sent to me by Mitchell Axel, who sent me a whole ton of books last year that he was unhauling. Again, he's not a booktuber himself, he's a Booktube commentator. And he very kindly sent me about 17 books in all. And I read the vast majority of them last year, but this was one that was left over and I've read this year. I read it today, in fact. So again, another Booktube gift related book. I've just ordered the new Ewan Morrison book. I can't remember what it's called, but it's something like How to Survive in a Plague or a Pandemic or something, which I think does what it says on the tin. I saw that on Twitter, where he tweeted, or someone had tweeted, an interview with him where he said he'd had to basically completely reconstitute the book once the pandemic had landed, and that's what interested me. So I've just ordered that, but that was from Twitter, not Booktube. And I suppose really is sort of via the author, although he hasn't sent it to me himself, obviously. And then finally, a book called Cyclonopedia. This was mentioned in passing by Jason over at Jason Has Books from Ireland, a booktuber, and he mentioned it in a Booktube video he made. I'm not sure if he's currently making videos because he's got a big enterprise that he's undertaking. But that book recommendation definitely came via Booktube, the Booktuber. So just to summarise, out of the 35 books, knock off the 2 non-fiction, 33, knock off the 5 I haven't read, 28. So I've read 28 fiction books and poetry this year. And out of those I've had 7 5-star reads, which is a pretty high strike rate, I think. And of those 7 5-star reads, 6 of them have come via Booktube, in the way I've just described, and one was the book that happened to be the book that the author himself sent me. So I think that's pretty instructive to me, at least. I hope it's of interest to you, just how influential Booktube is. Again, you know, headline figures: 35 books read, 33 fiction, 21 via Booktube, which I think is you know, I don't know what that percentage is. It's about 2/3, isn't it? Not quite. So thanks to Roz for the stimulating challenge of Booktube made me do it. Indeed, Booktube has made me do it this year, last year and the previous year by massively expanding what I'm prepared to pick up and read. So till next time, thanks very much.